I'm a university student, but on the side I teach Python one-to-one and in some small classes. I thought some people might find it useful to see how I teach my students. I'm not a great teacher, which is why this video and its lesson plans are going to be open source for you to take, change, and improve as you please. These lessons are designed for teaching complete beginners. Knowledge of Scratch is a great way for young students to pick up the problem-solving concepts like iteration and conditionals, but isn't necessary. To get students set up quickly, I like to use Replit. Replit is pretty easy to use. You only need your email address and you don't have to walk them through a scary installation of Python, and it has a simpler interface than VS Code, and you can just be invited to the project and be able to change their code if they make some small syntax errors. This is of course completely optional, but I think it really helps. Now this first lesson is just going to focus on input, output and variables, hopefully picking up some terms like syntax on the way. I find it's really important to let students walk into mistakes and have to fix them on their own, and get used to fixing errors by reading the errors in the console. I also try to make sure that each part logically leads on to the next, which can result in quite a fast pace, so you can stop at certain points and ask your students to complete extra exercises. After showing students how to print hello world, which is of course the first thing any student learns, I'd ask the students to try and print their name by changing the string. I then like to challenge them to print a triangle, given the top, like so. This is going to involve the students having to write multiple lines, and helps the students think about executing instructions in the right order, going back and changing different lines, and then understanding that everything in the string, including the spaces, is going to get printed out. Assuming they've done that okay, we're going to move on to variables, showing the students how to store their name in a variable. We'll use this to show them how to concatenate strings with variables using plus and comma and what the difference is. I then ask the students to write 3 sentences about themselves in the third person. Something like my name is, how old they are, and the year they were born. At first, this is just a test of print like they did before, but then I challenge them to store their name as a variable and try and use it in each of the 3 print statements. They'll then have to use the knowledge of concatenation that we just taught them to be able to fit their name into all 3 lines. This is where I'll introduce input to allow a user to make the variable's value an inputted string. The student's next challenge will be to calculate the year of birth using the same method. Using this value, we should just be able to work out how old they are, right? Well, not in the same way they might think, because if we take the given year from the current, we'll get an error. Here I like to go into more detail on what a string actually is. That is that the string 2000 and the integer 2000 are not the same thing. It may also be worth mentioning what a float is and a boolean value, but you don't need to go into too much detail yet. I'd show the student how to convert between int and string. We'll need this to convert the year to an integer and then be able to calculate the age of the user. It's at this point in the lesson I really look for something to challenge the students to combine all of what they've learned so far. It's at this point I ask the students to make a simple calculator that adds 2 numbers. This is going to require the students to take in 2 values as input, convert their data types from strings to integers, and format the whole thing using string concatenation. This is the first lesson I take all of my Python students on. This will usually take around an hour if you include setup, but of course you can always add in extra exercises if you think the student is doing really well. These can just double check that they understand the concept. Hopefully you found this useful. Please comment if there's an issue, and look in the description, you should find my GitHub with just a Jupyter notebook with this lesson plan on.